center for the diamond trade, and the Indian community is well entrenched there. But Belgium is now seeking to engage with India at a deeper level.
But first of all, we want to go further with the actual situation. We are involved in India in different infrastructure projects for the ports, for the highways. I've signed a MOU with the minister in charge for highways in India, and we will organize maybe a better involvement of Belgian companies in the development of stations, highway stations in India. We try to go further in the trading for diamonds. You know that our first trade with India is diamonds. And then also in different other fields like pharmaceutical products and in general term life science. But I've mentioned to my counterparts also the urbanization. If you want to manage the cities, you need to have new technologies to do that. For renewable energy, for waste treatment or water treatment, sanitization. So there are many progress to do in such a lot of fields. But the first issue to have more contacts, of course, is to exchange students, if it's possible, so to have also good collaboration among universities, about research centers, then to try to enhance the capacity to have more people coming from Europe and Belgium to India as tourists, or from India to Belgium and to Europe, because Belgium is the gateway to Europe. And so that is a very important process. And to do that, we have proposed that India will be the next partner for a major event in Belgium, is Europalia. Europalia, that means a cultural event with all the 2 years a major partner, and India will be the partner in 2013. So at the end of the year, in October 2013, we will open the floor for such a cultural event with many different parts of this event, so expositions, exhibits in different locations, and we will have a major exhibit in Beaux-Arts, fabulous place in Brussels. And I've started the process now to organize such an event. That means that we will have maybe many tourists coming from India to Europe and to Brussels to see such a lot of events around Europalia.
So how do you plan to bring the small and medium enterprises together from Europe, specifically of course from Belgium and India? Because that seems a difficult one to crack. The large business houses usually find their way around, and it's the small and medium enterprises that have a difficult time going and exploring countries and markets and gathering information. How do you plan to do that?
But first we try to enhance that with better contacts among the different companies and with the business people. And so is the reason why I've proposed to Mr. Sharma, my colleague for trade in India, to organize next year, beginning of next year, it will be in February maybe, during the AU-India summit, a business summit, a business forum. And we will try to receive a lot of businessmen coming from India and explaining what are the possibilities.
But will you have small and medium enterprises in that delegation?
Of course, because it's possible for them to come in a single country like Belgium, the capital of the European Union, so to understand what is the functioning of an economic side from the European Union, but also to understand that it's possible from Belgium, maybe in joint venture with Belgian companies, to work not only in Belgium, but also in Netherlands, in France, in Germany, in the same currency, the euro. We were speaking about the euro, and to don't have exchange risk, and to have the capacity to be located in the center of a very important market for medium-sized company, maybe also small, but I want to say more medium-sized company. And that is maybe profitable to explain that. And on the other sense, I will come back to India, I said, with a trade mission, but with a very specific target in some fields.
What fields would they be?
If we are speaking about renewable energy, if we are speaking about waste treatment or water treatment, there are medium-sized companies working in that fields in Belgium and open to discuss with Indian company here, and maybe also to organize joint ventures on that. And I'm sure that is the future, to have more and more partnerships if you speak about small and medium-sized company. Of course, if you have large company, they are able enough to do the job. But if you have small and medium-sized companies, it's sometimes better to work with a partnership, with a real joint venture, with a local company. And if you are doing that, the last element is to have maybe some operation together outside of India or outside of Belgium. I said for Belgium it's possible to go everywhere around Belgium in the European Union, but in Africa we have something to do together between Belgian and Indian companies. And again, if it's with very large companies, not a problem. They are doing that themselves. But for the SMEs, it's quite useful to receive some helps coming from the different states. And we will organize more and more. I was discussed today with some partners about the actual cooperation in South Africa. I've seen some partnerships between Belgian and Indian companies in South Africa, but why not in other countries of Africa? And it's possible to do that in the future.
The European Union and India are also likely to sign a free trade agreement, and negotiations, I believe, are on. Where do we stand on that today?
I'm sure that there are some progress made in the goods. If you look to the tariffication for the import and export of goods, we are making a lot of progress. But if you look to the services, it's more difficult. And I'm sure that such a target is very important. We need also to open the floor for the companies coming from the European Union to India, or from India to the European Union in the services. And that is maybe the next step. I'm hoping that it will be possible. I've listened to Mr. Sharma, who was very open to the discussion, but also with my Belgian friend Karel de Gucht, the European Commissioner. And I'm sure that we will have an agreement, but we need to take the floor for more and more concessions. I've listened that. It's not concession, it's a balanced situation. We need to make more efforts to do what? We have an agreement since some times with Korea, European Union and Korea, and we have seen an improving of the growth on both sides due to such an agreement. I'm sure that with such an agreement with India, it will be a part of the solution for some European countries to have more growth, but it will be also a very important add value for India.
Many countries seem to be clamping down on temporary workers coming from non-EU countries. There's even talk of restricting EU movements, but of course that hasn't happened as yet, but there have been talks on that. But people from India are going to find it exceedingly difficult to get work permits in Europe, considering that Europe itself has a problem with unemployment. So do you think that that is also something that Europe would need to look at into the future?
Yes, of course, but we need to move step by step. And I repeat, if we don't have a free trade agreement, if the trade is not free, or it's possible to explain that we need to have more workers coming from one part of the world to another one. So before to go to more facilitation, we have a facilitation process for the visas. But to do more, we need to prove that we open the borders. And first of all, it's important to prove that is the case for goods and services with such a free trade agreement. After that, I'm sure that we will see an improvement also in the facilitation for visas. And we are working on that. There are some contacts among different authorities in Europe and in India, but also in my country, in Belgium, with India, to do that.
Do you think Europe is going to put up barriers for people from overseas to come there, work there, live there?
There is always a risk to see that, of course, everywhere, because in a crisis time there is also some intentions to have more protectionism. I'm against that, and I'm not alone in Europe. Hopefully, because we are thinking that also in a crisis time we need to open the barriers and we need to open the markets, and not only for goods and services but also for the people, but people having the capacity to work and people having the capacity to sustain their life themselves in the country. And so in Belgium, to give an example, we are open to receive some people having the intention to work and to invest and to develop the activities in Belgium. And that's a possibility for the moment. So it's the reason why we have some facilitation for the visas. But I repeat, in crisis time, there are always some pressure to go back to a more protectionist approach. And that is a real mistake. If you look at in the world and in the past, it was always a mistake to go back to such an approach and to close the borders.
We understand that India is one land covers India quite like we do. Sri Lankan Airlines, you're our world.
Surya, New Delhi.
Kuwait Airways, wings of comfort, day and night. A beautiful experience, lip-smacking meals, exotic destinations, a world of comfort. Kuwait Airways, let's fly together.
Business development and investment in a mature overseas market such as Belgium has opportunities and challenges. Therefore, selecting a base within the European Union is a decision that one must consider carefully.
I think Belgium has created a very, very secure economic environment for both investment into Belgium as well as channeling investment through Belgium. So from that perspective, I think Belgium continues to be a very, very friendly and inviting destination for both an investment destination as well as a channel for your investment. Now I think my caution will be to Indian companies in general to be very clear about the objectives of investments into Europe. If it's for creating markets, if it's for creating technical capability, if it's for creating manufacturing capability, then it makes sense. But if it's for growth and size, then you have to be very careful, because the labor laws in these countries, the laws related to land and assets are vastly different from what's practiced in India, and that could be a burden to any business. So a lot of the suffering that has arisen for some of the acquisitions which were done in 2007 and 2008 by Indian companies are related to these two aspects. So Indian companies have to be just in general careful of that. But I would also sort of encourage them to use the offices of the European Union, of the Belgian government, and they seem to be extremely friendly, and they seem to be quite able and assistive in any kind of process that Indian companies are sort of undertaking.
Where do you see specific opportunities today for Indian businessmen or even job seekers with Belgium?
With job seekers, I think in the IT segment and in the other services, now all of Europe and including Belgium, I think given that the unemployment rates are fairly high, I don't see it being very easy to seek out job visas or companies being able to sort of source Indian workers that easily. Now, where I see the opportunity is more at a level of IT companies who are looking at, who have companies like TCS, Infosys have great toeholds in the Western European market, but I think they have yet to penetrate countries like Austria, Germany, Belgium, and so on. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity there for Indian job seekers and outsourced IT professionals. But in terms of business, I think Belgium could be a sort of a hub for any kind of marketing expansion or market access that Indian companies would want for the rest of Europe.
Marketing to the large market of the European Union via Belgium may be attractive, but much would depend on the economic state of these markets.
You see, it's interesting the way things have actually changed in terms of the financial and economic scenario in the world and in Europe and in developing regions of the world as well in the last 4 years. If you really look at Europe, large number of European countries have been facing debt issues and debt problems, fiscal disbalances, and so on and so forth. However, to the contrary, Belgium in the last 3 years in particular has emerged to be fairly very strong within the Eurozone. And one of the major reasons for this has been the kind of impetus the Belgium economic growth has seen in the last 1 decade, post the emergence of European institutions like the European Union, the European Commission, and the European Parliament, amongst other trade associations and embassies of various European institutions being set up in Belgium, which has boosted the growth, the multidisciplinary, multicultural affairs, and the trade activities within Belgium per se. So, despite the fact that Europe is still going through a troubled zone with Spain and Greece and various other countries having high unemployment levels, growth rates down, high inflations, the fiscal deficits going out of hands, Belgium is fairly stable and doing well.
So could Indians look at Belgium as a gateway, the capital of Europe as some would call it, and use that as a springboard to enter Europe?
Yes, to a great extent I would say Belgium is emerging as the center or the capital of the enlarged Europe per se. If you look at the kind of multicoloniality in terms of religions or the citizenships which are existing in Belgium, it is the most diverse amongst all European nations. The only problem with Belgium which I see per se, it is purely dependent on services, which is certainly an important concern. But given the fact that these European institutions are playing a critical role in the development of Europe, that does not seem to be a problem, at least for the next 20 years. And we will see a huge amount of impetus. If you look at the figures, the unemployment figure has actually gone down. The inflation rate is still around 2.5%. The reserves are about $27 billion, which is fairly comfortable given that $500 million economy is there. So given these facts, it seems to be quite progressive in terms of growth. The population birth rate is fairly comfortable. The death rate has gone down. So we are seeing, in terms of all gender parameters as well, they are on a comfort zone. So given these features, I see a fairly good amount of trajectory of growth in the next 10 years. And it is fairly central whether someone wants to do business in the north of Europe or in the south of Europe or with the neighboring regions of Belgium, that fairly facilitates their growth. So from that perspective as well, it is a very favorite destination for one to be.
But as you just mentioned, the services sector is where their strengths lie. Now, there is a limitation to what growth we could see in the services sector, especially in a mature economy like Europe, and the fact that India will be perhaps receiving outsourced work from Belgium in a time when the world is looking at domestic jobs and looking upon outsourcing not in a very kind way. So do you think that at this stage the services sector would in fact face a tough time?
You see, when it comes to services sector, specifically with Belgium, one of the biggest problems with services sector there is that they're boosting the per capita income, which has almost gone from $37,000 some $100 to $38,200 per person per capita. Now that is something which is boosting very high, and services sector has the capacity to boost much higher as against the per capita growth which is observed by countries or regions where there is industrial growth more or agriculture growth more. as compared to services sector growth, and that's where the problem lies, because once that level goes too high, then it becomes difficult for even an outsider to bring in and hire people in that region, and that becomes a difficulty for tomorrow's growth when it comes to services sector. But as regards as the growth within the country or within the region is concerned of Belgium, we do not see that happening as a discourage, because Belgium is not only boosted by the public spending which takes place because of the Kingdom of Belgium, but also because of the public spending which takes place due to these international institutions or the European institutions called the European Commission, the European Union, European Parliament, and various other trade agencies of Europe which are housed in Belgium. They are almost like pseudo-government agencies, and they are also doing a huge amount of public spending in terms of the growth. So from that perspective, I do not see any kind of a turn down in the services sector. But for an external body or an organization to come and set up offices and do business based in Belgium, it may become a little difficult, and the prices may rise as high as what we see in Luxembourg, which is just a neighboring country to Belgium, in a few years' time ahead of us. As far as outsourcing is concerned, I think India may tend to benefit to some extent, but there is a large amount of embargo which is being placed by some of these European institutions to only transfer business of outsourcing to some of the weaker countries of Europe, which is the Eastern European countries. So there are chances that large amount of business which could have actually come to India might shift to Eastern Europe in terms of outsourcing as well.
And the same goes for jobs, perhaps, where jobs in Europe would not be offered to non-EU citizens. So do you think that there will be a crunch?
Yes, in Belgium in particular, there would be certainly a crunch for Indians in specific to find appropriate jobs, unless they're wanting to open up their own organizations or do extensive business with some of the European institutions. There may be restrictions. As I said, the services sector which is boosted in Belgium in particular is more government oriented, and there are two governments in parallel actually running in Belgium. One is the Belgian government and the other is the European institutions government, and that's where the spending is coming. So the first nomenclature of employment or employability would typically be EU member nation citizens and not a non-EU member nation citizen, and that's where the restriction typically comes in, because it's the taxpayers' money which is being spent by the EU institutions, and so that will be restricted to the taxpayer or the member nation countries only, and that's why we would see less employment opportunities coming forth from India going to Belgium.
Do you think the free trade agreement that is likely to be signed sometime in the near future would boost business between India and Europe and, of course, Belgium?
Yes, we are going to see a lot of things which is going to move up. Almost about 50 to 55% of trade partnership with Europe is there with India for almost over a decade or so now. So that has been going up by about 5 to 10% every year, every 4 or 5 years. But still, we are one of the largest trade partners with Europe. Belgium in specific, we have a huge amount of trade which takes place in diamonds, and that's where a huge amount of export again is expected to take place once this new partnership, the new free trade agreement comes into picture. But we also see that there are a large number of value-added services that Belgium is still offering given its tradition, and I think we might see that kind of a flourishment take place once this trade agreement comes into picture. Belgium has become one of the most favorite destinations for most Indians these days, not only for business but also for pleasure in terms of tourism, and I think that's where a mix of business and pleasure is what Belgium has to offer in today's time, more than just doing business.
With the free trade agreement likely to be signed in the near future, opportunities are likely to emerge for Indians. We suggest, as always, that you travel to the country and seek out the opportunities most appropriate for you. Until next time, we wish you luck in your opportunity hunting. Goodbye.